Neighbours by Tim Winton. When they first moved in, the young couple were wary of the neighbourhood. The street was full of European migrants. It made the newlyweds feel like sojourners in a foreign land. Next door on the left lived a Macedonian family, and on the right a widower from Poland. The newlyweds' house was small, but its high ceilings and paned windows gave it a feeling of an elegant cottage. From his study window, the young man could see over the rooftops and used car yards the Moretonby figs in the park where they walked their dogs. The neighbours seemed cautious about the dog, a docile, molting collie. The young man and woman had lived all their lives in the expansive outer suburbs, where good neighbours were seldom seen and never heard. The sounds of spitting and washing and day-breaking watering came as a shock. The Macedonian family shouted, ranted, screamed. It took 6 months for the newcomers to comprehend the fact that their neighbours were not murdering each other, merely talking. The old Polish man spent most of his day hammering nails into wood, only to pull them out again. His yard was stacked with salvage lumber. He added to it, but he did not build with it. Relations were uncomfortable for many months. The Macedonians raised eyebrows at the late hour at which the newcomers rose in the mornings. The young man sensed their disapproval at his staying home to write his thesis while his wife worked. He watched in disgust as the little boy next door urinated in the street. He once saw them spraying the cat from the back step. The child's head was shaved regularly, he assumed in order to make his hair grow thick. The little boy stood at the fence with only his cobalt eyes showing. It made the young man nervous. In the autumn, the young couple cleared rubbish from their backyard and turned and manured the soil under the open and measured gaze of the neighbours. They planted leeks, onions, cabbage, Brussels sprouts and broad beans, and this caused the neighbours to come to the fence and offer advice about spacing, hilling, mulching. The young man resented the interference, but he took careful note of what was said. His wife was bold enough to run a hand over the child's stubble, and the big woman with the black eyes and butcher's arms gave her a bag of garlic cloves to plant. Not long after, the young man and woman built a hen house. The neighbours watched it fall down. The Polish widower slid through the fence uninvited and rebuilt it for them. They could not understand a word he said. As autumn merged into winter and the vermilion sunsets were followed by sudden dark dusks touched with the smell of wood smoke and the sound of roosters crowing day's end, the young couple found themselves smiling back at the neighbours. They offered heads of cabbage and took gifts of grappa and firewood. The young man worked steadily at his thesis on the development of the 20th century novel. He cooked dinners for his wife and listened to her stories of eccentric patients and hospital incompetence. In the street, they no longer walked with their eyes lowered. They felt superior and proud when their parents came to visit and to cast shocked glances over the fence. In the winter, they kept ducks, big silent muscovies which stood about in the rain growing fat. In the spring, the Macedonian family showed them how to slaughter and pluck and to dress. They also ran on blocks and upturned buckets and told barely understood stories, the men butchering, the women plucking, as was demanded. In the haze of down and steam and fractured dialogue, the young men and woman felt intoxicated. The cat toyed with severed heads. The child pulled the cat's tail, and the newcomers found themselves shouting. But they had not planned on a pregnancy. It stunned them to be made parents so early. Their friends did not have children until several years after being married, if at all. The young woman arranged for maternity leave. The young man ploughed on with his thesis on the 20th century novel. The Polish widower began to build. In the late spring dawns, he sank posts and poured cement and began to use his wood. The young couple turned in their bed, cursed him behind his back. The young husband at times suspected that the widower was deliberately antagonising them. The young wife threw up in the mornings. Hay fever began to wear him down. Before long, the couple realised that the whole neighbourhood knew of the pregnancy. People smiled tirelessly at them. The man in the deli gave a small presents of chocolates and him packets of cigarettes that he stored at home, not being a smoker. In the summer, Italian women began to offer names. Greek women stopped the young woman in the streets, pulled her skirt up and felt her belly, telling her it was bound to be a boy. By late summer, the woman next door had knitted the baby a suit, complete with booties and beanie. The young woman felt flattered, claustrophobic, grateful, peeved. By late summer, the Polish widower next door had almost finished his 2-car garage. The young man could not believe that a man without a car would do such a thing, and one evening, as he was considering making a complaint about the noise, the Polish man came over with barrowfuls of wood scraps for their fire. Then came the pushing. He caressed and stared and tried not to shout. The floor trembled as the young woman bore down in a squat. He felt the power of her, the sophistication of her. She strained, her face mottled. She kept at it, push after push, assaulting some unseen barrier until suddenly it was smashed and she was through. It took his wind away to see the look on the baby's face as it was suddenly passed up to the breast. It had one eye on him. It found the nipple. It trailed cord and vernix smears and its mother's own sweat. She gasped and covered the tiny buttocks with a hand. "A boy," she said. For a second the child lost the nipple and began to cry. The young man heard shouting outside. He went to the back door. On the Macedonian side of the fence, a small queue of bleary faces looked up, cheering, and the young man began to weep. The 20th century novel had not prepared him for this.